Test one, two. The meeting of the Board of Regents, State of Iowa, for November 7th, 2024 will come to order. I will begin by calling roll. Regent Dunkel.
Here.
Regent Barker.
Here.
Regent Rouse.
Here.
Regent Hensley. Here. Regent Lindemeyer.
Here.
Regent Kramer.
Here.
Regent Reiswick.
Here.
Regent Bates is present. We have a quorum and the meeting can proceed. Are there any items board members would like to remove from the consent agenda for a separate vote? A motion for a second and a second are required to approve and receive items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Also move Regent Bates, but I would also like to indicate that I'll abstain from voting on the September minutes because I was not present. Thank you.
Noted.
Yes for everything else.
Noted. Motion by Regent Hensley. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Regent Rouse. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Regent Reiswick.
Yes.
Regent Dunkel.
Yes.
Regent Lindemeyer.
Yes.
Regent Barker.
Yes.
Regent Rouse.
Yes.
Regent Hensley.
Yes.
Regent Kramer.
Yes.
Regent Bates votes yes. The motion is approved. Now I'd like to recognize each president to report on recent activities at each university. We'll begin with President Nook.
I'll learn to operate the chair here. Thank you. Well, Regent President Bates, members of the board, and colleagues across the state, welcome to the University of Northern Iowa. It's a pleasure to have you on our campus and to be able to share some thoughts and some of the happenings here on our campus. We often share numbers and talk about numbers an awful lot, and those are important. They help us understand exactly how things are going and take the temperature of an institution. Today, I'm not going to spend any time on numbers. You've seen many already at this meeting. I want to share some stories and get to the heart of what this institution's about. I'd like to ask you to reflect on the presentations that you saw yesterday here on campus, from the tour of the nursing facility and the conversations you had with the nursing faculty and the students, to the presentation by Rec Services and the impact that it's had both nationally and internationally. As well as a presentation by Professor Nicole Zumbach-Harkin, and the way she's helping students prepare for their lives after they leave the University of Northern Iowa. And finally, the stories you heard about our faculty and staff who were recipients of the Regents Excellence Awards. I want you to think about those. And then here at the University of Northern Iowa, a few years ago, we put together a purpose statement. That purpose statement reads that the purpose of UNI is to enrich lives, communities, and the world through our students, faculty, staff, and alumni. They went beyond the purpose statement and created 3 how statements. How do we deliver on that? In those 3 statements, we create an environment in which every person is able to achieve their academic, professional, and personal life goals. We empower individuals to build strong senses of purpose, community, and responsibility. We innovate ethical solutions to the problems of our time. It's apparent in what you heard about yesterday that UNI is living out that purpose and doing everything we can to fulfill it. I want to share a few stories of some of our students and how they have met that purpose and how they reflect what this university does. Our tradition and foundation as a university is that of serving students, especially young students in our educational systems, dating back to our founding, really as an orphanage for Civil War veterans, children, and then on as a normal school, training teachers for the normal schools in our state, and finally to the university that you're here today visiting. One of our valued traditions in this educational environment is our teacher education convocation. This convocation is held every year to welcome the new students who are entering the teaching profession. This is for students who are rising into their junior year, and they take a pledge. It's a very solemn ceremony. It's also a very celebratory ceremony, as these students really officially enter the profession. They aren't receiving their degrees, they aren't receiving license at this time, but they're making a commitment to work towards that goal, to achieve that goal, and in many ways becoming professional teachers, educators at that point as they dedicate their lives to this profession of teaching. So it's a very celebratory time, parents and family members. And this year's speaker at that event was Jared Smith, who is the superintendent of Waterloo Community Schools and is also one of our alums, sharing his thoughts about what it was like as he transitioned from an educator, from his education here, becoming a teacher, and ultimately becoming an administrator. But a very, very solemn event on our campus, but also one of extreme celebration for these young people as they enter their professional lives in many ways. We've also started a new tradition this year as we welcome the first and inaugural class of nursing students on our campus. We, this year, initiated the first white coat ceremony, a way to formally induct students into the nursing education program here at the University of Northern Iowa. Much like the teacher education ceremony, this is very solemn and also very celebratory. And this year, not without a few tears by parents who were so proud of their students for being inducted into this program. Our speaker at that event was Dr. Robert Good, who's a retired internal medicine physician and former chief medical officer for Alliance Health Medical Systems and a faculty member and physician at Carle Medical Management and Carle Foundation Hospital. It, again, was just a wonderful way to induct and introduce these students to our campus. And again, a new tradition for the university as we continue to serve these students, but more importantly, serve the people of Iowa through this education program. I do want to introduce you to a few of our alums. Heather Narr is an individual that came to UNI from Illinois. She graduated from UNI in 2017 with a major in mathematics and applied economic analysis. She currently is a senior market intelligence and data analyst for Kemin Industries in Des Moines. She's one of these students that came to us from out of state, from one of the states surrounding us. And because of her education here, and because of the community that she found here, decided to stay in the state. Her husband, Robert, that you see pictured here with her, attended UNI for a little bit, played on our basketball team, ultimately completed his degree at an institution in another state, but decided to come back to Iowa as well, and is also a software developer with Kemin Industries. At the age of 28, Heather was so impressed with the education that she received here, and her husband committed and founded an endowed scholarship in STEM education here at the university at the age of 28. It's really remarkable to have somebody that early in their career recognize the gift that they've been given through the education here and want to give back. And again, this is one of these students that we recruited from Illinois who is now a member of the greater Iowa community. Aiden Young is a very similar story. He's originally from Wisconsin and got an undergraduate degree at one of the regional comprehensive universities in Wisconsin and came here for his master's degree in athletic training. And he came for two reasons. One was his grandfather. His grandfather worked in our dining halls back when he was a young college student, just before he was drafted into the Vietnam conflict. But he always spoke so highly that one of his favorite places and one of his best times in his life was during his time here at the University of Northern Iowa. And then Aiden's high school athletic trainer is a graduate of our program. And she talked so much about her experience here at UNI that she decided she really loved it here, and she talked to Aiden about it. So he decided to come to this institution. As we've talked to him, and Aiden has now taken a job at Cedar Valley Medical Specialists as an athletic trainer here in the greater Waterloo, Cedar Falls area. And what he says is that when he got ready to graduate, he didn't want to look anywhere else. He had really fallen in love with Waterloo and Cedar Falls and wanted to stay because of the sense of community that was here and because of the way that the faculty and staff on this campus made him feel a part of their family. He talked about how he really did feel they were reaching out to him like he was a regular member of their family, and that they continue to do so even after he's graduated. So again, one of these stories where we've been able to bring students from other states into our university. And after graduation, they become members of, in this case, the Waterloo community, but citizens in the state of Iowa and productive citizens in the state. Emily Junker is a student in our UNI at Iowa community colleges, and in particular, the Wilson College of Business hybrid accounting program that's offered on the UN at DMAC, through the UNI at DMAC partnership. In 2014, she was a college student and developed a medical issue that ultimately resulted in her withdrawing from college at a time and sitting out for a while and working full-time. In 2020, she returned to college and enrolled at DMAC and was working full-time. And she discovered the hybrid accounting program, which we launched just a year ago, and she was very excited for it. One, it was launched on her birthday, and she thought that was some kind of sign and the best birthday present she had ever had. But she's very excited about the program and working towards receiving her accounting degree and ultimately taking the CPA exam. But she's able to do this while she's continuing to work full-time. Her comments about this program is, this is a really innovative program. It's been a unique experience because it feels like the students are in the driver's seat. The program is just a lot more flexible, and UNI makes your journey what you want it to be. So very appreciative of the outreach to these community colleges and able to continue to get their degree in a place that in the past hasn't been possible for them. And in particular, the Future Ready grants that we were able to fund with the governor's help a few years ago were a big part of being able to help Emily in this program. Finally, at our last meeting, I mentioned that the Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Business Management and Resources was going to be speaking on our campus. His name is Richard Verma. Richard's father was a student here back in the 60s, received a specialist degree, and that's why he wanted to come back. He reached out to us and said, I want to come and talk to your students. I want to know more about your campus. I want to learn more about my father's experience. And so we invited him back, and he came back to give a presidential lecture. But he met with our students in the political science and history programs and talked about what service in the Foreign Service looks like and what his path was to end up in the roles that he's been in. He served as the ambassador to India for a time and has had a career as a professional attorney with major Fortune 500 companies. But he also then delivered a public lecture on foreign policy and public service as a presidential lecture, very much in the vein of what we were talking about with the Center for Civic Education that we presented to you at that time. But it also, because we were able to invite him here and let other people know that he was coming, he was able to connect with Governor Reynolds and spend some time talking with her as she had just returned from India on an economic development tour. So they were able to share some ideas, and he also had the opportunity then to sit down with former Ambassador Branstad and speak with him a little bit about the things that are going on in China and in India, but also with the things that are going on with the World Food Prize as well. So very exciting opportunity because of the way we served his father in particular and coming back. With that, I hope that these students and alumni stories complete the picture that you saw yesterday from the faculty and staff that you were able to meet, the faculty and staff that you were able to honor, and that you can see that we do truly enrich lives, enrich communities, and enrich the world by creating an environment that does allow everyone to reach their goals and does empower individuals to build strong senses of purpose, community, and responsibility. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, President Nook. Okay. Now I'd like to recognize President Wintersteen for your comments and
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and I want to do a special welcome to Regent Hensley. Great to have you on the board. Wonderful to have the opportunity to visit with you yesterday. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to give an update on Iowa State University. I'll focus my remarks on a few examples and a key set of metrics on how we are doing our best to be the most student-centric leading research university. From our very beginning, 156 years ago, our commitment has been to the land-grant mission of access and opportunity to all, and we've been unwavering in that commitment to really be a caring community that offers the opportunity for every student to achieve their academic goals if they're willing to work hard, to become well-prepared, to be a member of the workforce. And one way we do that is through high-impact career preparation. You can see from the slide that we do that pretty well. When we have students graduate, you can see that 97% of the individuals that graduate and earned a degree last year had participated, 97% of them, in 3 or more high-impact practices. And they can be undergraduate research, internship, be a member of the honors program, in a learning community, study abroad, entrepreneurship program, capstone course or more. And it really allows our students to put what they've learned in the classroom to work in these high-impact practices. And it makes a difference. I think it helps with the placement rate that we achieve at Iowa State University. 95.5% of our students have jobs well in advance of when they graduate. And do an excellent job, I think, once they perform and are in that job in the workforce. Another wonderful example of a high-impact program is our Center for Sustainable Rural Livelihoods. This is a program that's located in the Kamuli district of Uganda, one of the poorest areas in the world. And it's a program that's supported by donors. This marks the 20th year of this impressive program. It was started with a leadership gift from the Kolchowski family, and they've been joined by more than 600 donors, providing gifts of more than $38 million to support this program. It's an extraordinary investment with an extraordinary impact. Over the years, more than 200 Iowa State students have worked in the project at the facility that we have in the Kamuli district. You can see the impact listed up there. 50,000 people now have access to clean water because of the boreholes that have been put into place. Over 3,800 children have been fed daily lunches at their schools. 10,000 residents receive nutrition education, and over 500 youth have completed entrepreneurship programs that allowed them to generate income. And that's really the future. How do we build business acumen in the community so they can go on to be able to generate income for their families? Really an incredible opportunity to make a difference in the world through our students to have that opportunity themselves. So not only are the youth in Uganda being changed, but Iowa State University students are being changed. Well, when we think about Iowa State University students themselves being able to graduate debt-free, you can see the difference up here. In 2008, we had 29% of our students graduating debt-free, and now 44% graduated debt-free last year. We continue to make scholarships a priority in fundraising, and this fall, nearly 3/4 of our undergraduate students received donor-funded scholarships, and last year donors gave $44.8 million to fund scholarships at Iowa State University. Well, record-breaking research. We continue to rise as a leading research university. For the 3rd consecutive year, our faculty and staff researchers set a new record for external grants and contracts, totaling $346.2 million. That's up 50% in just the past 4 years. So what a wonderful record. We're in the top 3% nationally, ranking for research among universities without a medical school. Our research is earning global recognition. The Ames National Laboratory at Iowa State University is a winner of a prestigious 2024 R&D 100 award. The international competition is often referred to as the Oscars of innovation, recognizing new commercial products, technologies, and materials that are available for sale or license for their technology significance. A team at the National Ames National Lab was recognized for developing a battery recycling process that recovers critical materials, including lithium salt, graphite, and more from end-of-the-life lithium-ion batteries. So lithium-ion batteries are everywhere. They're in your cell phones, computers, electric vehicles, but only 5% of these batteries are estimated to be recycled. The water recycling process is simple, efficient, and safe, and it doesn't use any acids. It doesn't add to the toxic impacts on the environment from other recycling processes. It also produces green hydrogen, a clean energy source, as a co-product. So what a wonderful, wonderful recognition for the Ames National Laboratory. Groundbreaking and potentially life-saving research is happening in the chemistry lab of Professor Robin Anand. Professor Anand has been nationally recognized for her work to find faster, more accurate ways to detect melanoma, the deadliest form of skin cancer, and create new hope for effective treatment. Yesterday, you heard from the University of Iowa and their work in addressing rising cancer rates in Iowa. Dr. Anand collaborates with faculty at the University of Iowa on this important issue. Let's take a look at what Professor Anand does with her research.
When I was a postdoctoral researcher, I had a close friend who was diagnosed with cancer. We spent a lot of time together because we were rock climbing together, and he used to teach me the routes, all the strategies to be able to get through the tough parts. Hearing that news from him was really devastating. You know, one of the things that I knew was that it was possible to be able to get more information about whether the cancer was spreading, but a lot of those technologies weren't accessible yet. And so one of the goals of my research is to make that capability more accessible. Melanoma is the deadliest form of skin cancer. Among states in the U.S., Iowa has the highest rate of melanoma, and it's the only state where the incidence of melanoma is increasing.
What are the challenges in detecting and treating for melanoma?
Finding these melanoma cells in blood is already challenging. It's like a needle in a haystack. And then being able to isolate them individually is a next level challenge, but it gives us information that's very impactful for treatment. Melanoma cells respond differently to an electric field than other cells present in the blood. We've developed a device that can easily find those cells in blood and then test cell-to-cell differences that can tell us about how the patient might respond to therapy. When treating melanoma, it's very important to know the enemy well. We've already developed multiple tests for invasiveness and for drug resistance in melanoma cells. Having this simple test is going to help physicians make better treatment decisions and stop melanoma in its tracks.
There you go, Dr. Robin Anand, one of our innovators at Iowa State, one of our latest editions of our videos about innovation at Iowa State University. Well, lastly, we're pleased to introduce Cyclone Civics, a new initiative at Iowa State designed to promote civic engagement and free speech as required by the Board of Regents, Directive 9. During this first year, our focus will be on assessing civic literacy of our seniors using the Purdue Civic Literacy Exam. We'll also plan and host a faculty and staff professional development conference on civics across the curriculum and co-curriculum. And we'll be planning a year-long commemoration America at 2:50 to mark the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The commemoration will kick off next fall and culminate with a campus-wide celebration in April of 2026. Well, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for President Wintersteen? Regent Hensley?
Thank you. The one item that I really appreciated in your presentation was the information on students that were debt-free when they graduated. And student loan debt is something that's really significant for me as I look at the different universities, so I appreciate that information. And I just think that as we're looking at student loan debt for all the students within the colleges, that we need to figure out ways that we can minimize that debt. And I think it needs to be a partnership with not only the lending institutions, but also the universities and any other bodies. So I just hope that we continue making that a top priority as we're having the reports each meeting with the university. So thank you.
Thank you, and we certainly consider it a top priority as well, and have taken many different steps to help our students understand everything from the seriousness of when they take out a loan and having loan education programs to working on campus and how they can do that and manage that along with what their work is in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So we agree with you completely, Regent Hensley. Yeah, great.
Regent Kramer?
Good report. On that melanoma test, so that's a blood test that can kind of detect it? And
Correct.
is it up and running, and what's the next step?
Still under development, but love to have you have the opportunity to visit with Dr. Anand. And again, what's great about this is the partnership with Dr. Anand and the scientists at the University of Iowa. We have so many opportunities to work together, and it's a nice way to highlight that with this particular project.
Regent Barker?
Does that research number, the 350 million, does that include Ames Lab, or is Ames Lab?
No, that would include that.
That does include it, okay.
Thank you, President Wintersteen.
Thank you.
Good report. President Wilson, would you like to come up next?
Good morning, President Bates, members of the board, and I join my fellow presidents in welcoming you, Regent Hensley. We're glad you're here, and I know you're eager to learn a lot. We are excited to welcome you for a visit at the University of Iowa soon. Yeah. This morning, I'm going to focus on faculty. I often focus on students, and today we decided to be a little bit laser-focused on faculty. And you've probably heard me say this before, but you know, we cannot be a great university without great faculty, and our students come to study with our faculty, our students are inspired by them, and it's a constant effort to recruit the best and the brightest and to retain them at Iowa. So I want to give you some updates on the work we're doing on that front. I can also talk about student debt too, if you'd like me to, but we're going to focus on faculty right now. So one of the things that we launched when I arrived at Iowa is a new mid-career faculty award, and we didn't really have a way to honor those up-and-coming rising stars, particularly the newly tenured faculty. This is a competitive process. We started it 3 years ago. We now have 13 awardees over 3 years. We average 4 a year, although in the first year we had a hard time breaking a tie, so we gave out 5 awards instead of 4. And the great thing about this is that these are really up-and-coming faculty who are establishing national and international reputations. You can see that this group this year comes from 3 different colleges, so there's some effort to get diversity among the different disciplines, but we're really picking the best and the brightest. And the great thing is that these folks meet together on a regular basis throughout the year. They get professional development, they learn about the institution at a higher level. the provost and I actually have lunch with all 3 of the cohorts together, so they learn from each other, they learn from us, and we're really trying to create ways to make sure we have stickiness to the university through this process. And of course, we're supporting their research as well and helping them launch bigger and better external partnerships with federal agencies and other sponsors of their research. So it's a great program. We have more people than we can possibly award, but it's competitive. And I think one of the great things we heard the first year is that one of the awardees said that she didn't take a phone call from another university that was trying to poach her because she just accepted this 3-year award and felt like she had to stay at Iowa. So I think it's working. Another thing that we're doing is constantly raising money for named chairs and professorships. These are the creme de la creme kind of award for tenured faculty, usually full professors, and they're based on gifts from donors and from supporters that believe in the mission that we're engaged in. And we now have about 415 named positions across the university. We've added 30 since the beginning of this current campaign that we're in, which is started in 2019. Our goal really is to continue to have these kinds of awards because these are also a way to recognize the best and the brightest and ensure that these faculty stay at Iowa. Usually these are at least 5-year commitments to these faculty, and typically they're renewable. The professorship or chairship provides money for their research. It adds some money to their salaries, so you can see we've actually used a lot of these gift dollars to enhance faculty support on the salary front since we started, and we're always talking to donors and grateful patients about the importance of these kinds of opportunities to support faculty. The other thing we're doing is just recruiting talent constantly. So you heard yesterday from Vice President Jameson about our new director for the Holden Cancer Center. We recruited Dr. Burkhardt from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Very excited to have him on board. One of the things he told me in conversation during the recruitment process is that he was really excited to come to Iowa because he felt that we were laser focused on rural health and on working to really do a better job of getting health care out to all parts of the state. So we're really excited to have him join us. He's going to be a difference maker. And he was part of what we've also launched 3 years ago, a transformational faculty hiring program. What we're telling the colleges is if you have a senior faculty member that you've got your eyes on across the country, it's hard to unstick them. It's hard to recruit them here. So the provost and I work to gather funding to entice these folks by providing research funding and equipment funding to encourage them so that they don't lose any ground if they were to uproot from one institution to another. Dr. Burkhardt was part of this program, and we also recruited a new professor in the risk management area. You all know we launched a brand new major in TIPI, risk management and insurance. It's growing like crazy, which is exciting, and Professor Grace has joined us from Temple to help us lead that program and really help with all the student interest that we have. So those are the two of the transformational hires. And then in healthcare, they're just hiring great people because they have lots of leadership opportunities. We recruited from Yale a new chair for our OBGYN department. So if you ever hear that we can't recruit people from the Ivies or from the East Coast, that's just not true. And we recruited a new chair for our Department of Internal Medicine from Stanford, and she's just going great guns. So we're constantly bringing talent in, and then of course we have to retain the talent that we bring to Iowa. But these are difference makers and great examples of how you bring top scholars who can hit the deck running. We also have to focus on salaries for faculty. You've seen this graph before, or this chart. I think I share it every year. The good news is we're making some progress. So we invested about $17 million in our salary program last year to try to get salaries up. And we gave an average of a 3.1% salary increase. That was average for all faculty. But we have work to do. So we benchmark ourselves against our BOR peers, and we still are a little lower than we would like. Those are the averages there that you can see. If you remember from last year, you probably don't because I had to remind myself, but we were 8, 10, and 10 last year. So we've made significant progress at the assistant professor level. We've gone from 10 to 7, which is great. That rank is particularly important because it's more of a fixed timeline. Associate and full professors can be in those ranks longer, and you may have fewer or more of them at different parts of that trajectory. So averages are harder in that sense. Some universities have been around for a long time, have a lot more full professors than we do, for example, and their salaries grow over time. So I think the assistant professor is really important because that really launches the pathway forward for all of our ranks. But we've made good progress, and we're going to keep our eyes focused on, are we competitive across our BOR peer group, and what can we do to we don't expect to be number 1, 2, or 3 probably, because there's cost of living differences. In our peer group include Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, but we also have non-Big Tens like Arizona, UNC, and Utah. And cost of living in some of those places is more than it is in Iowa City, but our faculty still expect to make a good salary, and they look at the market nationally. They don't look at the market locally. So room for improvement, but we've made some improvement. On the research front, we are really pleased to see that our research continues to grow. This is our expenditures, not our awards. That's typically what's measured at the national level. You can see that we've had $150 million growth since FY20. We did have 2 really strong years because there was a lot of COVID funding during those 2 years. But I think the good news is we're back up again from last year, FY 2024. And we've got a lot of work to do in terms of more center grants and bringing more faculty together beyond NIH. So we know we've got opportunities with NASA. We need to look a little more at DOD. We're going to diversify our research portfolio. I'll show you a graph of that in the next slide. But the good news is our faculty are busy. They're writing lots of proposals. They're getting funded. And we're about to announce a new VP for research. I'm speaking with the person later today, and the letter's been signed, so I can't say anything yet, but I can tell you it's a go-getter, and that person is going to help us on this front as well. So here's a pie chart that shows what our federal funding looks like in Iowa, and you can see it. NIH dominates. That is to be expected given that we are a very big medical enterprise, but we need to diversify, and there's funding available at NSF that we can be more competitive for. NASA we're doing pretty well at, but DOD I think we can grow as well. So we're constantly looking at opportunities for R01 grants, but also for center grants and more collaborative opportunities. Let me give you a sense of 2 awards that we're really excited about that just happened recently. This is Professor McMurray, who just received a 5-year, $13.8 million grant from NIH to continue his work on cochlear implants. I think you know that Iowa is known for this research. We are leading the way in the devices and in the technology, and the research will really impact thousands of Iowans who have hearing loss and people beyond the state of Iowa as well. And he's really finding that people have different ways of adopting their understanding and their hearing of words and word choices, and he's doing much more individualized understanding of how the technology can help how people are processing sounds and words. So this is a great opportunity. He's in the psychological and brain sciences department, but of course works in our speech and hearing with our speech and hearing faculty as well. Here's another great example. We just hired a new dean for our College of Pharmacy. We lured her away from the University of Kentucky, and within months of her arrival, she found out that she had received a $10 million federal award from ARPA-H, and she got to bring most of it with her to Iowa. So this is a great opportunity. It's an award that will help her continue her pioneering work to treat ovarian cancer, and in particular look at different therapy targets that will just target cancer cells and not healthy cells. So she's bringing the bulk of this award with her, and we're really excited to have her here at Iowa, and she's going to be a real difference maker. We can see it already. She didn't know she was going to get the grant. We didn't know it. And then after she arrived, she found out. She has to leave a little bit of it back at Kentucky, but the bulk of it is coming to Iowa. So really excited about her leadership as a new dean, but also on her work on ovarian cancer. And that's the end of my presentation. I can tell you that 50% of our undergraduates graduate with zero debt, and the other 50% have about $28,000 worth of debt on average. We're working to get that number down with all of our efforts around fundraising, but of course we're eager to work with you and continue to work with the state on how we can support Iowans and their eagerness to get degrees at our institutions. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions or comments for President Wilson? Hearing none, thank you for report. It was
Thank
a
you.
good report. I'd like to thank all the presidents for their reports right now, and I was amiss before. President Nook, thank you for hosting us here very much and for lining up the tour for us yesterday. It was very good. All right. So next, the board will receive an update on the progress of the universities towards compliance with Senate File 2435, which has been established in Iowa Code 261J regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion programming and activities at our institutions. At the September board meeting, I said we would complete our work by the end of the calendar year. The board's review of the universities for compliance is complete. As you can see from the report, the universities have completed most of their work. There are some university efforts currently underway, and we will ensure they will be completed as soon as possible. This review will not be static. We are directing each university to establish a process for continual review of current and new programming. All of us need to examine what we are doing to ensure that we are compliant with the law in everything we do. As a board, our role is governance of this process, which we take seriously. We will continue to ensure that the universities are monitoring and evaluating their activities and programming to ensure ongoing compliance with 261J. Let me be clear. This statute has been adopted by the state, and we will follow the law. I look forward to hearing the formal presentation and hearing any comments or feedback from my fellow board members. Would Dr. Boone and Amy Clays come forward? I would like to recognize Rachel Boone, the board's Executive Chief Academic Officer, and Amy Clays, Board Counsel, who will now make the presentation.
Thank you, President Bates. In the spring of 2023, the board president established a DEI study group tasked with conducting a comprehensive review of DEI programs at the Regent universities. The study group presented its report and 10 recommendations to the board in November of 2023. The board adopted the 10 recommendations as directives. Directive 1 requires the universities to restructure the central DEI offices to eliminate DEI functions that are not necessary for compliance or accreditation. To implement Directive 1, each university eliminated the central office responsible for DEI programming. The University of Iowa's Central Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion was previously comprised of 3 offices: the Office of Inclusive Education and Strategic Initiatives was the office primarily responsible for fulfilling the university's DEI mission. This office was eliminated in compliance with Directive 1. The remaining 2 offices were restructured and retitled to assure compliance with Directive 1. Iowa State University also eliminated its central DEI office in compliance with Directive 1. The University of Northern Iowa eliminated both its central Chief Diversity Officer position and the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Social Justice. During the April meeting, the university presidents provided an update to the board regarding these eliminations, as well as other efforts to implement the remaining 9 directives. On May 9th, Governor Reynolds signed into law Senate File 2435, which contains a new section found in Iowa Code Chapter 261J, governing DEI offices and positions on the Regent campuses. While Iowa Code Chapter 261J is not effective until July 1, 2025, President Bates requested that board office staff immediately begin working with the universities to review any remaining DEI functions and develop a plan to ensure compliance well in advance of the law's effective date. Board office staff initiated this work by first analyzing new Iowa Code Chapter 261J and developing a methodology for conducting this review. Staff consulted with University Counsel and met with representatives from the Attorney General's office during this stage of the process. Iowa Code Chapter 261J prohibits the universities from maintaining or funding a DEI office or position, with certain exceptions. The new law contains a 5-part definition regarding the types of programming or activities that qualify a unit as a DEI office or position. This includes efforts to manipulate the composition of the student body or faculty with regard to race, sex, color, or ethnicity, promoting differential treatment on the basis of race, color, or ethnicity, policies or procedures implemented with reference to race, color, or ethnicity, programming designed or implemented with reference to race, color, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation, and efforts to promote, as the official position of the university, a widely contested position regarding certain specified topics. The law contains a list of functions that are automatically excluded from the definition of a DEI office. This includes academic departments, student organizations, research funding, and the provision of health care. For units that meet the definition of a DEI office but do not fall within one of the exempt categories, the law states that DEI functions may continue to the extent they are provided by state and federal law or accreditation standards. Breaking the law down into its component parts provided the methodology for conducting this review. The review process was guided by 4 fundamental questions. First, does the unit or position meet the definition of a DEI office under 261J? Second, is the unit or position otherwise exempt as provided in 261J? If it is not exempt, is the unit or position nonetheless provided by state and federal law or accreditation standards? And finally, for any remaining units or functions, the board office and the universities conducted an evaluation to determine if adjustments or eliminations were required to assure compliance with the law. Once this methodology was established, the board office next developed a comprehensive list of all state and federal laws that could be applicable to this review. This includes state and federal civil rights laws, freedom of expression laws, and state laws governing mandatory employee trainings. Additional information on these laws is included in Attachment B to the report. The board office also developed a comprehensive list of all potentially applicable accreditation requirements at the institutional, departmental, and programmatic level. I'm going to turn the presentation over to CAO Boone, who will provide additional information related to accreditation.
Thank you. So as you heard yesterday in the report during the Academic Affairs Committee, both institution-wide accreditation from the Higher Learning Commission and the more than 50 program-level accreditations are held across our 3 institutions, and these are all critical to monitoring compliance issues, quality assurance, continuous improvement efforts, as well as licensure eligibility for graduates of many of our programs. So in terms of compliance with Higher Learning Commission, this does include, I just want to be clear, this does include compliance with other state and federal laws as a baseline assumed practice within the HLC. So a lot of the work of our review focused on the programmatic and department and college level accreditors. The issue of licensure does not affect every program, but there are many for which there's state law suggesting that completion of a degree from a licensed program is required. And this often also serves as a basis for licensure reciprocity across state lines. These interstate agreements are pretty well established. Areas such as nursing, teaching, veterinarians, pharmacists, many healthcare, there's licensure reciprocity. A lot of that is based upon accredited program completion. So in working with representatives from the provost's office, as well as various individuals from across the colleges, schools, and various departments, there was a lot of effort put into reviewing all of these program accreditation standards to identify any that might relate to diversity, equity, or inclusion, both in an attempt to understand the accreditor's expectations, but also to understand what are programs doing to meet those standards. As we noted in attachment C to this report, there are a lot of accreditors, or several anyway, with no standards at all that relate to DEI, but for those that do have a stated connection, there is wide variation in those expectations and how departments are expected to address them. The use of a program or college-wide committee was one of the things we looked at in this review process, and it is one strategy that's employed to address accreditation standards in some instances. The universities have each developed a process for reviewing such councils and committees across the campus to understand their work and ensure it aligns with the accreditation standards or any other compliance requirements. So this work is actually currently still underway. All the reviews and adjustments are anticipated to be completed either by December 31st or shortly thereafter. A final note regarding accreditation is that this is an area that will continue to be fluid. President Bates just noted in her opening comments that this is not a static thing. So accreditation standards do evolve along with their professions, along with the needs of employers, along with advances in their disciplines. So the Council of Provosts has already begun discussing the best mechanisms for tracking these changes and updates to accreditation standards and the various departmental activities to ensure that we can have sustained compliance with state law. After we developed the review methodology for all of this, all the analysis of the state and federal laws and accreditation standards, the board office then worked with the universities to develop a list of all the potentially covered units and positions, and we were as comprehensive as we could be. The list of positions and units that we looked into in this process was very intentionally over-inclusive. Board office staff, primarily Amy and I, worked directly with university administration and the various subject matter experts at the institutions to review these units and positions in light of the methodology that Amy has just described. Over the course of the last 5 months, we've had many in-person and virtual meetings with the presidents, with representatives from legal, human resources, academic affairs, student affairs. Many representatives of the campus have been involved in this work. And during this time, we also were providing periodic updates to the 4 regents who were tasked with overseeing this work under the leadership of President Bates. So the results of this part of the review are detailed in the body of the report that you've received, as well as in attachment G of that report. You see the office by office breakdown of the work the review work. So we began by assessing the changes that were already initiated to comply with the Board of Regents directives from last November. We confirmed that each university had, as Amy described, eliminated its central DEI officer functions in compliance with Directive 1. And that also has a concurrent compliance with Iowa Code Chapter 261J, the new law. We then worked with the universities to evaluate the other centralized functions and distributed and positions. And again, those are all noted in attachment G. Some of the examples of ones that were included in this, as we talked about being over-inclusive, included student disability services, military and veteran support services. Again, we looked really broadly, so you can see that reflected in the report. In other cases, there were units that met the definition of DEI, but they were necessary to assure compliance with state and federal law. So this primarily included university offices for civil rights compliance, again, as reflected in the report. There were some units identified as requiring restructuring to ensure compliance with Iowa Code Chapter 261J. For example, there were plans developed for restructuring the cultural centers so that any programming or activities that meet the definition of DEI under the law are sponsored and provided for by student organizations moving forward, because student organizations are an identified exemption. Each university also engaged in a process of reviewing all of their distributed positions, as I mentioned, the committees, other related employee groups that might have responsibility for supporting DEI-related programming at times, or various activities spread across the institution. When a particular function is not directly connected to legal compliance or a specific accreditation standard, the universities have been working hard to examine how they can modify or eliminate those activities. The primary focus of the board office's review was on structural components of the university, meaning offices, positions, job responsibilities. But again, we want to acknowledge this is not a static thing. It is an ongoing activity. General processes to review and address campus activities to assure ongoing compliance are in development. We are, as issues arise and as requirements of either through law or accreditation or other areas evolve, we do believe that each university will have the mechanisms in place to review them and identify appropriate responses to them. The board will be responsible for submitting an annual report to the General Assembly and the Governor's Office each year, starting in December of 2025. So procedures are being established to ensure very good ongoing communication between the universities and the board office so that we can maintain compliance and ensure that we're meeting that reporting obligation. Amy and I are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions or comments? Regent Hensley?
I just want to acknowledge and thank you for such a thorough job done. I know I came in late on this process, and there had been a lot of work done, but I've been extremely impressed with the process that you've gone through. And I was very pleased to hear the statements from the students this morning that we met with, because they are excited about this, and they feel that now it's open to all the students on the campus. And I thought that was extremely positive, because I have my one, I wouldn't say caution, but just a little bit sensitive to the fact that we have changed the makeup of programs and areas, and I just want to make sure that they continue in the direction that everybody has agreed to at this point. So thank you for all the work.
Regent Barker?
Thank you. I want to thank the board and university staff for their hard work on this report. It's well structured, and it gives an enormous amount of information about our DEI programs and legal and accreditation requirements related to DEI. The report identifies DEI offices that have been eliminated because they will soon be prohibited by under Iowa law. In fact, they are being eliminated 8 months before this law takes effect. But in my opinion, this report is only a start. SF 2435, signed in May of this year, now Iowa Code Chapter 261J, as you just heard, the law is designed to keep university administration out of politics. Professors can conduct research and take controversial ideas wherever they go, but the university itself should be neutral on politics and controversial issues, as suggested by the Calvin Report from the University of Chicago. When a university, as an institution, proclaims something controversial to be true, it chills the freedom of professors and students to come to their own conclusions. The new Iowa law says that Regent universities shall not maintain a DEI office unless it is provided by law or accreditation standards. There is no law or accreditation standard listed in today's report that requires our universities to maintain DEI offices. There is no law or accreditation standard that even mentions a DEI office, making it difficult to argue that such an office is provided by law or accreditation standards. These laws and standards require outcomes like fairness and lack of discrimination, but our universities did that long before we had DEI offices. Furthermore, the intent of SF 2435 and the Board of Regents directives passed last year is clear. Eliminate DEI offices that are not necessary for compliance. There is no justification for the continued existence of any DEI office at our universities. The next logical question is, what is a DEI office? DEI is defined in the law as any effort to promote differential treatment or to promote certain ideas related to race and other characteristics. The report presented today tells us that several offices at the universities were DEI offices and have been eliminated. Academic departments and student organizations are exempt from the law, so it only deals with university administrative offices. So the next question is, are there still DEI offices on our campuses? This report suggests not. It tells us that the remaining offices that were reviewed were not engaged in DEI activities. This is where I believe we have more work to do. Just this semester, there were several examples of university administrative offices that are not being eliminated or restructured that promoted DEI. Promotion of these ideas has been so widespread in university administration that achieving compliance will take a great deal of effort. Strategic plans still need to be changed, and our presidents need to strongly communicate that they expect our universities to follow the spirit of the law, not find ways around it. They need to take Board Directives 8 and 9 seriously to bring intellectual diversity to campus and fully comply with 261J. If they do not, I believe there will be more legislation next year in the next legislative session. I also want to emphasize that we are not reducing the amount of student support, as Regent Hensley was just saying, that we want to make that support available to all students. And we do not want to silo or divide students as we provide that support. I also want to reemphasize that we are not in violation of state law. That state law has not taken effect yet. We're trying well ahead of time to get into compliance with the law. But judging from activities that we've seen in recent months, we're not there yet, and we still have more to do.
Are there any other comments? Regent Kramer?
Yeah, maybe following up on that, how do you two propose, it looks like you've done first of all, thank you for all the work, and it looks like on those structural changes, you've made some big headway in that direction. Under the definition of DEI in the law, the letters D and E about efforts to promote and promulgate trainings, programmings, and activities, and E is, any effort to promote as the official position of the public institution, these controversial topics as being, what's kind of the process of trying to tackle those two things and then keeping in compliance over time?
So two answers to the question, two-part question. With regard to the first part of the question, governing ongoing trainings, programming activities, that's where the universities have or are in the process of developing internal review structures so that, again, as everyone has noted, this is not a static process. So they need to have the structures in place and the staff assigned to review new programmings or even existing programmings on an ongoing basis, in part because, again, Rachel and I focused primarily on the structural components, but also understand that even if an office, position, or unit is fundamentally exempt from the law or not covered, we still need to pay attention to the discrete programming that unit to assure that the programming continues to be compliant. So that's where the internal structures come into play at all three campuses, obviously in ongoing consultation and cooperation with the board office, and to the extent appropriate, the Attorney General's office. So that's how, from a forward-looking basis, we plan on approaching that aspect. The second part of the question dealt with that portion of the law that talks about universities taking official positions on certain topics. We anticipate bringing proposed changes to the board's policy manual, addressing university statements on matters of public concern, and potentially developing a new social media policy applicable to all three campuses that will help address and provide guidance on how that portion of the law is going to be interpreted and implemented on all three campuses. So we do plan on bringing those changes to the board in February for likely a first and final reading if it is appropriate at that time. Rachel, anything you'd like to add?
And maybe along with that would be a good, and maybe these student groups would want to participate, is trying to have a process where when something weird, I say weird, when something that violates this law pops up in a class, what's their process of, saying, hey, turn this in, this isn't quite complying with the deal, and just have an orderly process. And even as we get texts or whatever, I would assume we would probably phone it to Mark and he would follow up with it to see that it gets addressed.
Absolutely. the current policy manual on freedom of expression, which is where the university statements on matters of public concern is located, contains a mechanism, a provision for filing allegations of violations of that policy with the board office, and then the steps about how that will be resolved. So any changes will be incorporated into that review process, but we can certainly provide clarity during the February board policy manual proposals on if anybody sees something on campus that they have concerns about, where do you file that, right? Who do you bring that attention to? So we will include those adjustments.
Regent Dunkel.
Well, that's a good point. First of all, thank you for that report, because I can't believe the work that must have gone into that to dig that deeply, and I'm very happy about that. To your point, Regent Hensley, this morning when the students said to us that, you know, they're working through this, that it's going to be okay. And then Regent Kramer, to your point, like who do they go to? We're missing a student representative on our board. And for you that, you know, you don't know that, but when they were on the board, they gave us that input. So we really need to put our efforts into getting that seat filled so we can hear that perspective as well. Because that's the process, that we hear what the students are saying, or that was my opinion.
Regent Lindmeyer.
Yes, I want to echo the sentiment about the appreciation of your work. It's an incredible amount of work. This has caused an incredible amount of work. And I also want to reemphasize what all of the regents have stated so far. I don't think anybody, when you break out DEI, nobody is against diversity. We all know diversity of thought is good. Diversity of perception is good. We know that our world is becoming more diverse, so it's something that we all live every day. Equity is something that we've all been birthed to believe in and live every day. And certainly inclusion is something that we all want. I think some of the mistakes that we make as institutional leaders is that we tend to institutionalize those things and put them into boxes and move them forward. And it seems to me that politically or wherever this has come from a political movement, in my belief, but that's where the tussle has come in, is that we've institutionalized these things and maybe taking them too far in some instances, maybe not far enough in others. That's my opinion. But I appreciate the work. I don't think we want to lose the qualitative piece of DEI. You know, it's maybe the institutionalization of it, but I hope that we don't lose the qualitative piece of the ideas of DEI individually. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Regent Kramer?
One last comment was that I was concerned that that these accreditation boards might be pushing an opposite direction of where this law was going. But David Barker, Regent Barker, made a comment, and maybe you'd want to comment to it, that maybe even with this change of administration, that maybe those, the Department of Education won't be pushing against what we're doing. Do you mind commenting to that?
Well, I think this week, everyone's still trying to figure out what all of that means. And there certainly could be some changes in direction on accreditation and other issues.
Any other comments? So I will try to finish this up. Thank you, all of you, for your comments at this time. It's been very helpful, and I respect each and everyone's opinion on this. But I would like to take this time of the knowledge that I have as the time that the presidents, President Wilson, President Nook, President Wintersteen, and all their university counterparts, the time that you've taken and the commitment you've shown to reach compliance for this new law. And as we heard today, it's reached down to the students, and isn't that where we want it to be? But I'd also like to thank Rachel Boone and Amy Clays for their leadership in this process, the tremendous amount of time that they've given, and their commitment for their working with the universities to help them achieve this compliance these past several months. It has truly been outstanding and very appreciated. Thank you. This time, let's take a 15-minute break. Or 10. I'd like to recognize Jason Pontius, Associate Chief Academic Officer from the Board Office, who will make the next presentation on fall enrollment.
President Bates, members of the board, thank you for inviting me here today to talk about enrollment report. For the last few years with the enrollment report, I've been kind of covering some of the challenges we've had and the interesting times we have moving forward with college enrollment. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. It's not hard to find within the news, media stories looking at college closures, college mergers, and declines in enrollment. A number of universities nationwide have failed to meet their enrollment goals. Some of that is blamed over the last year on FAFSA, but some of that may be a little bit overblown. What we are seeing is some pretty stark examples, like Drexel University, for example, in the last year, came 500 students short of their projected fall enrollment, which was a 15% decline over their previous year, which was unexpected. It's a nationally known university in a large metropolitan area, but it's an example of some of the struggles that schools are having. Now, there have been closures. I haven't seen any real evidence that the closures have increased rapidly at this point. What you're seeing a lot more is closures of small private universities, colleges and universities. Those are typically been schools under 3,000, even more likely under 1,000 students that have closed. And in addition to that, you're seeing more, instead of a closure, you're seeing consolidations or mergers. So St. Ambrose and Mount Mercy recently announced that they're going to be combining their efforts, and I expect we'll see more of that in the future. Now, it's not all bad news for certain colleges. There are some colleges and universities that have been thriving, in particular the highly selective colleges and universities and state flagship and large public universities. There seems to be a narrative out there of students being more debt conscious and trying to reduce and kind of maintain lower debts for going and getting their college degree. Those that are willing to take on debt are willing to do it for more of a national name brand in many of these cases. So within that environment, I want to talk a little bit about the enrollment at our 3 universities. And as you can see and have seen in the news reports, our numbers are up. And that is fantastic news. It is a testament to the work of our 3 universities that in this environment that we have been able to maintain and grow our enrollment. It is down a little bit from our absolute all-record peak in fall of 2016. And it's important to point out that 40% of that drop over that time are from Chinese national students who are choosing not to attend our universities. And another factor that is influencing that is nationally, there's been about a 7 to 10 percentage point drop in the percent of high school graduates that are choosing to go to college. Now, during this time where our numbers have gone up and down a little bit, the focus has remained the same. So we still educate 80 to 81% of our students are undergraduates, with kind of the remaining 4% for professional, about 17% for graduate students. So that really has not changed. And in addition to that focus, our focus on Iowa residents has not changed either. The numbers have gone down a little bit, but in our current year, we are 59% of our enrollment are Iowa residents that we are educating. You can see that that number has ticked up over the last year, and we have seen some growth in the out-of-state residents. International students have recovered a little bit from our drop. That recovery is not coming from Chinese students. It is actually coming in part from students from India that are increasingly attending our universities. Now, I want to focus a little bit on things that are kind of driving or affecting the first 2 lines, the Iowa residents and the out-of-state residents to our universities. What looms large in the public imagination and a lot of the press out there is the enrollment cliff. And it also apparently lends for some really interesting graphics that folks like to put into their news stories. On the left is the Chronicle of Higher Education story talking about the cliff and warning of a second one. And yes, there does appear to be a second one coming. And Forbes article talking about the who's going over the cliff. That seems to be the favorite speculation of colleges and universities and the media these days. Now, where this is coming from is a study by Nathan Graw a number of years ago, looking at a 15% decline between 2025 and 2029. That data is coming from American Community Survey data. It is a sample, and generally speaking, the samples are pretty good. And while this decline is going to be affecting us nationally, it is not evenly distributed. So there are major differences by region and state. The two regions that are expected to be hit the hardest are the Northeast and the Midwest, and with the least amount of impact in generally the South. Now, if we take these numbers from the American Community Survey that Graw used to make this prediction and apply them to the state of Iowa, we get this, I hate to call it a curve, but we get this line. And it's a little bit of nonsense, and it certainly doesn't reflect what we're seeing as far as high school enrollment and the number of students that are coming through and graduating from our high schools. So as an indicator of our pool of high school graduates, this is not particularly good. A few years ago, what we did is we went into the enrollment at the K-12 level and actually looked at total enrollment in our K-12 system, and you can kind of predict forward from there based on kind of how many students who are first graders go on to become seniors and then go on to graduate from high school. That gets us this curve instead. So I've updated this from previous years, and so it's now using 2022 as a reference point. So we can see that we are expected to go up and then come back down again in 2029, but kind of back to 2022 levels. And what's interesting in Iowa is while the nation looks like the class of fall of 2025 is going to be the high water mark, we are going to go, it looks like, a little bit higher in 2026 before the decline begins. So yes, there is a decline. I hesitate to call it a cliff. And yes, we are looking to have the second one starting again around 2034.
But it's not really a cliff, right? Because that percentage change is always positive on the blue line.
Correct.
Is that fair? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I use the cliff in quotes, honestly, because that's what
Right.
what gets used
Our rate
nationally.
of growth slows, but we don't
Correct.
fall. Okay.
Now, to look at whether this is actually indicative of the actual high school graduates, because this was a prediction made about 3 years ago, I went ahead and plotted in the actual number of public high school graduates in the state, and as you can see, it's tracking very closely to that. Now, this is not to say that we are going to have a 4.8% increase this year in the number of Iowa residents coming to a university. It was closer to about 3.5%. Because the red line and the blue line are talking about the pool of which we pull from. Now, while that pool may be fairly stable and static over time, what is changing in the state is we are becoming increasingly diverse in racial ethnic categories. Now, none of these categories are monoliths. But it's important to point out that in some of these categories, historically, there have been lower college-going rates. So it's something that we need to keep in mind as we move forward in attracting and retaining Iowa high school graduates in the state. So that's the pool. Let's talk about kind of interest from our high school students in this. So for the past 19 years, the Iowa Department of Education has been asking high school students at graduation where they intend to go for either for college or their kind of plans after they graduate. There are other categories included. I'm focusing on a few here. And you can see in 2010, the graduating class of 2010, 40% of Iowa high school graduates indicated they planned to go to a community college. Now, that could be either in Iowa or another state, but most of them would be going to Iowa. That has gone down over time. You can see that in the past year, we have data, 28% of those high school graduates were indicating an interest in going to community college. At the same time, that interest in public four-year has stayed the same and gone up a little bit. But what I think is particularly interesting is the purple line showing interest in going straight into employment after high school graduation. That climbed in particular during COVID. Obviously, the hourly wage has gone up significantly during that time, and that may be driving some of it. and it also probably is driving some of the decline in college-going rates. Now, to see how well intent to go to college tracks with actual going to college, I've pulled here the kind of the orange line showing the number of students that were interested in going to a four-year public, and that's four-year public anywhere, to those who actually went to a Regent university. Now, you can see there's a gap, but those lines track very closely to each other. And that gap is explained by some of those students are going out of state to a four-year public. Some of them, it may be intended to go to a four-year public, but maybe got a better scholarship offer from a private college in the state, decided to go to community college for a few years instead, or increasingly we're seeing decided to, that they didn't need to have a college education as part of their post-high school plans. So we've got intent and enrollment, and then this is looking at using data from the Iowa statewide longitudinal data system. This matches all of our high school grads nationally through the National Student Clearinghouse and gets an idea of where they're going. So it digs in a little bit more at where our market share is for the Regents in particular. One of the questions I often get when I say that the enrollments have gone down in some cases, it's like, well, more students are going to go out of state. And that has not been the case. That number has gone down slightly over time. So we are keeping those students in the state. And you see our market share is declining a little bit here, but that is in relation to the no college growth at the very top of the bars. If you take that out and look only at the students who are going to college, our market share has been strong, if not growing, during that time. So, kind of in summary, we've got some challenges coming up for enrollment for the colleges and universities going forward. So we have fewer high school graduates nationally. That's going to affect out-of-state students and kind of that pool of out-of-state students that we draw from. There's a drop in college-going rates, particularly among men. That drop in the pool is going to cause increased competition for college students and the need to attract and retain increasingly diverse student bodies, not just in Iowa, but nationally. And then finally, and this is fairly pervasive, the perception that going to college is a waste of money, incurs too much debt, and may not be worth it, particularly when you can make $15 an hour straight out of high school graduation. Now, to our benefit, we have a stable pool of high school graduates to draw from. And our students mostly stay within the state. These are all very good things. And we've seen growth in larger public universities nationally, so I would expect that we will hopefully see continued enrollment growth for at least the next couple of years with our new incoming classes. And then one of the things that has benefited us, particularly among the states that we draw from most, which is Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, is our costs of attendance are comparable to a lot of times the in-state costs for those schools. So we provide a good value for a lot of out-of-state students, and that's one of the reasons we're seeing that out-of-state number grow. And then the final point is everything you see is that we're going to be needing for our economy going forward, more education, more technical training, and I think that is going to be driving kind of a return to colleges and universities, hopefully particularly in the community colleges where they could see some of the relevance in getting that additional training to help with the economy of the future. So with that, I'm done, but I'll take any questions you might have.
Regent Lindemeyer.
Jason, you talked about this a little bit in your narrative, but I didn't see any graphs on the number of out-of-state students that attend Iowa universities. I know in the past, Iowa's been in the top 2 or 3, I think, in the nation as far as net import of students. Are we still there, or has that waned?
I didn't do the numbers for this latest year, but the last time I ran it, which was a couple years ago, we bring in about 4 students for every 1 student that we send out of state, or that leaves to go to out of state. So we have been a net importer for a very long time.
Regent Barker.
Of the students who don't go to college out of high school, take a job, how many of them come back to college later?
A lot of the metrics we use are kind of like a standard candle based on 1 year after high school graduation. So that's a lot of what you see in these reports. We have done the Iowa post-secondary readiness reports and the Iowa part of the statewide longitudinal data system do track for 6 to 8 years after high school graduation. We don't see a lot. There was a lot of speculation during COVID or during like the FAFSA issues over the last year that more students would take a gap year. We haven't really seen that go up over time. It's been about 2% of high school graduates wait and go that second year. But that has been fairly stable over the last 10 years that we've got data.
Okay, so of the students who do not go to college out of high school, it'd be less than 10% that come back to
That
college
would appear
later?
to be the case, yeah.
Regent Weiswick, did you have a question?
Yes. The challenge, the comment you make about the drop in college going rates, particularly among men, is interesting.
Yeah.
But what is our enrollment ratio of women and men in the universities?
Yeah, it's in the report. I've got it broken down by the kind of undergrad, grad, and professional. And it depends greatly on the school, but right now for undergraduates, about 52% women. And it's not unusual to see nationally schools where there's 60% women.
Is that trend is widening, or
Yes.
that gap is widening?
Yes.
So you could look at that previous slide, you say the men are just going to work, but I've also read elsewhere that they're not going to work either. So is there any idea of what's actually happening with the young men?
I could make a lot of money if I had a really good idea of what was going on there. You've probably seen the same narratives I have. I have not seen anything that explains all of it. Yes, the employment covers part of the explanation, I think, but it certainly doesn't cover all. I've seen articles where they talk about kind of a failure to launch kind of mentality among some men. I don't know, but it's something that I think we need to get a better grasp of going forward.
Regent Dunkel?
To piggyback on a question that Regent Barker had about the people that don't go to school, take that gap year, or go to work and then take non-traditional nighttime classes, weekend classes. Do you have any information on how much that number has risen? Because Iowans known for their, extra hard work. Is that a factor in some of this?
It's tricky to track students over their kind of like their lifetime of after time. So we've done a little bit of that with the statewide longitudinal data system, but what we are seeing is we don't have a clear answer to that, no. But we are not seeing enrollment ticking up for community colleges, which is what you would expect to see if more of those folks that were choosing not to go to college right after high school were then going back later. But I don't have the numbers to kind of do that full track of students that may have taken time off and then going back.
Well, or the part-time, because they're working full-time and doing that part-time.
Sure.
Regent Rouse?
Kind of going along with that, for the community college numbers, just to make sure I understand it, that does not include dual enrollment in high school, correct? It would just be post.
Correct. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I mean, it's sometimes hard to parse those two out because some of the reports include dual enrollment and some don't. That is just looking at enrollment at the community colleges and not high school students taking community college courses.
Regent Lindemeyer?
Jason, have we seen any change nationally or in Iowa particularly for the populations ethnically that are traditionally non-college going populations? And I always thought that was a hole in that book, the college cliff or enrollment cliff, was that immigrants traditionally, their first few generations, they come here to work. They don't come here to go to school. And I've been hopeful that particularly the Hispanic, because there's been high growth in that, and I think the Asian population has done this, but that maybe they've started to maybe enroll in college more. Have we seen any changes in that nationally, or?
I haven't looked at the national numbers there. We tend to track way ahead of kind of national trends within the state of Iowa. One of the areas that we've seen a lot of growth, obviously, in the state is in the Latino Hispanic population. and their college going rate is actually quite high, and their success in college has been quite high. It can always improve upon, but it's been, I think, a success story.
Regent Barker.
Following up on Regent Reiswick's question, I'm just noting from your report that in our professional schools, there's 62% women.
Any other questions or comments? I have one. We're not going to let you be done yet.
Okay.
So those students from high school that go on to work and then they come back to school, is there workforce involvement in that? Is there any way to track? Is that because John Deere says, I will pay your tuition so you can go back to school as long as you come back and work for me for 5 years? And John Deere, I'm just using you as an example.
We don't have a good, clear picture of that. We are working with workforce development and their data team to try to do a better job of tracking. We can do it within the state fairly easily, and looking at wage records and unemployment insurance data to get a better idea of that progression and how and what happens over time. So it's a difficult question to answer, but we are working on trying to get at that.
I just think it'd be a good way to get students and people where they want to be and need to be. Sometimes they need encouragement to build on the skills that they already have. So, okay, great. Anything else? Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Board Senior Communications Director Josh Lehman, who will give a brief overview of the Regents' efforts in economic development and introduce each university presenter.
Thank you, President Bates. Members of the board, as presented in the docket item, Iowa's Regent universities do an outstanding job collaborating with business and industry and each other to foster success for economic development efforts in the state. They provide expertise and assistance directly in all 99 counties. In fiscal year 2024, the three universities provided nearly $1.39 billion in total sponsored funding to the state. Today, you'll hear from each university on their individual efforts and activities. First up will be John Darcy, Chief Innovation Officer from the University of Iowa. Next will be David Spalding, Raisbeck Endowed Dean of the Ivy College of Business and Vice President for Economic Development and Industry Relations at Iowa State. And finally, we will have Randy Pilkington, Director of Business and Community Services at UNI. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, everybody. President Bates, thank you for having us today. I'm going to focus my economic development summary on three separate areas. The first is growth and transformation year over year, the previous year. The second is two promising developments that will expand our ability to drive economic development. And the third, I will share a promising novel program attracting national attention. So let's start with JPEC. I'll highlight three key programs, each experiencing greater than 70% of growth year over year. The first is the NSF I-Corps program that nearly doubled participation among startups last year. This is the first place budding faculty entrepreneurs turn to learn the fundamentals of starting a company. Nearly doubling the I-Corps participation year over year is a great sign and a barometer of the future potential for future impact in Iowa. The second point I want to highlight is the JPEC student internships at Iowa startup companies. Though the numbers are modest, they only reflect JPEC students and not the broader universities. These numbers are significant because startups are always hungry for affordable talent. Enabling these internships enable several of these students to have job opportunities to stay in Iowa post-graduation. The third area that I want to focus on from JPEC is their Small Business Development Center. They saw significant growth year over year in funding raised by non-university startups that they support. It's another sign that JPEC is on the right track. The Office of Innovation support for inventors and startups is creating significant ecosystem momentum. These graphs give you a longitudinal look of how funding has changed over the past decade. GAP, or seed funding, on the left, has remained steady. We see more inventors today, but we give out less money because our rigor and standards are higher. We're more discriminating than we were before. In FY20, we began engaging venture capitalists and industry expertise to vet these young, early startups, and often we send them back and say pivot or change and come back to us again for monies later. Nonetheless, this is an area that I think we can improve, as I'd like to see the numbers of inventors and the amount of seed capital we dispense grow. The middle graph represents SBIR and STTR funding. This is non-dilutive federal funding for early startups. And you can see that the average number of dollars has nearly doubled since this office was created. These non-dilutive federal grants often are the strongest predictor of future success. The companies that raise SBIR funding typically are successful raising significant venture dollars later. The final graph is the one I'm most proud of. Equity raises among university startups have grown from an average of roughly $8 million a year to nearly $60 million a year today. I do not expect this trend to slow in the near term. Let's look at how this affects the university royalty payments and success fees. UIRF, the Tech Transfer Office, revenues from royalties has seen a steady uptick in their royalties and income stream over the past 3 years. I've added the data beneath just to illustrate just how long human health startups take to create a return. These are 3 of our best success stories. And note that the average time to a first payment back to the university is roughly 8.5 years. Now let's turn to developments that could increase URIF's return by increasing our ability to consistently broaden the pool of would-be entrepreneurs and viable startups. In 2021, the Iowa legislature gave Regent universities the right to take equity in startups. JPEC, via the Center for Advancement, is creating a philanthropic venture fund. New monies and an evergreen fund are very welcome, but not more important than the opportunities it will present to students and alumni. Students will have opportunities to work in all aspects of this fund. The fund will act as a magnet to draw alumni interested in donating by writing checks, but also by donating their expertise. It's a way to pull alums back toward Iowa. The creation of this fund should positively impact all stakeholders. When I arrived at Iowa 6 years ago, the research park had roughly 30,000 square feet of commercial wet lab space available to Iowa startups. It was full, and it had a waiting list. Well, 6 years later, it's still full, and we still have a waiting list. With IEDA Director Debbie Durham's support, Governor Reynolds' office found a mechanism to provide us with $8 million of ARPA funding to remodel existing space to create the Medical Innovation Launch Laboratory. It will alleviate some of our wet lab challenge while creating for the first time a programmatic hub for all aspects of healthcare innovation within walking distance to the entire healthcare and engineering campus. This new facility will not open until FY26, but when it does, it will be a game changer. Finally, I'd like to share news about the Iowa Nurse Innovators, a new program we are launching this year following a successful 2-year pilot. When I arrived at Iowa, we were providing seed funding to faculty and vendors of all stripes, but we had never provided similar opportunities to nurses. In fact, I could not find a program anywhere in the U.S. doing so. And yet nurses are forced to innovate, to create workarounds and ad hoc solutions for inefficiencies they face every day delivering care to patients. As a former executive in the medical device industry, I made it a habit of gathering insights from nurses to improve the products we sold to hospitals and physicians. Nurses approach problem solving holistically, so I was determined to create a seed funding mechanism, collaborating with the College of Nursing and UIHC Nurse Leadership, plus partnering with a nonprofit called Maker Health, led us to pitch the Kauffman Foundation for a grant. They loved the concept and agreed to provide us with $400,000, but only if we built a program that could be implemented at rural hospitals as well as at our academic medical centers. Today, we are 2 years in, and we've touched 1,000 nurses of all types, and along the way, we discovered many other allied health practitioners who also are budding inventors. Thus far, 54 ideas have turned to 38 projects, and 4 of those are now being implemented clinically. Now let's hear from some nurses.
My name is Courtney Smith. My name is Julie Boothby. It's Julia Langen. Cord control is a major issue around the surgical field. Hygiene and taking care of a patient can be done by a multitude of people.
I noticed that we had a problem with cervical collars causing pressure injuries in our patient.
Nurses are constantly innovating. If we don't have something, we're gonna find something to make that work.
Nurses are notoriously innovative.
This is what this program is all about. It's meant for people to have an idea and have it come to life and ultimately make patient care safer and easier.
What we didn't fully appreciate when we started this pilot was the impact it could have on things like nursing burnout or job satisfaction. We also didn't think about retention, and certainly we didn't think about hiring or the ever-present challenge of hiring nurses until we noticed that the nursing administration at UIHC was using our videos in their recruiting promotions. It turns out that recognizing nurses, giving them agency and space to exercise their creative instincts can have a profound impact on patient care and job satisfaction. We've launched in 3 counties thus far, with active projects under discussion in 20 more. There are 83 critical access hospitals in the state of Iowa. I was born at one of them, just an hour down the road in Manchester. We know rural sustainability is dependent on access to health care, and we know that nurses are a critical piece of the social fabric of rural communities. Replacing a nurse in these communities is often no small feat. This modest program and the community it is creating could have a profound impact on small towns across the state. I'm excited about the program and economic development in general at the University of Iowa, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? No questions.
Do you want questions now, or for each one, or do you want to save questions for the end?
It's really up to you.
Go ahead, Josh.
No, whatever you prefer, President Bates.
All right. Are there any questions for University of Iowa? Regent Kramer, thank you.
On that nursing program then, so are there opportunities for these nurses to, if you could monetize their innovation, are they getting some reward for that?
Absolutely, yeah.
I would just like to add a comment to when you're talking about nurses. I worked with nurses many, many, many years ago and experienced many of the different things. I want to say like duct tape and safety pins, but the different innovative ways they try to make a patient more comfortable. And had they been able to be a part of this program now, it would have been fun to watch what they presented with and then how far they went. So thank you.
Exactly. You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Iowa State.
Well, thank you, President Bates, for this opportunity to talk about the great work that we're doing every day at Iowa State University to enhance the economy here in the state of Iowa. We carry out that work in all 99 counties across our state. Am I up? It's a secure presentation. There we go. All right. So 10 years ago, Iowa State University established the Office of Economic Development and Industry Relations. The goal was to bring together all of those units at Iowa State that primarily work with corporations outside of our campus. Over the last 6 years, we've really taken this in sort of the next direction that we felt we needed to go, which was getting more engaged in actively marketing, actively working with companies in our state to bring the resources of Iowa State University's economic development efforts to them. The Regents commissioned a report 2 years ago, the Lightcast report, that was done in 2023, and it showed that Iowa State University generates almost $5 billion of economic impact for the state of Iowa, a major source of economic impact in this state. And that doesn't include our extension operation and the value of Iowa State education. If you add those in, the total comes to almost a $6 billion impact over that 2022 fiscal year. We've received wonderful recognition, both nationally and internationally, for the programs that we have at Iowa State University in economic development. Almost a year ago, we were named the winner of the top award from the Innovation and Economic Prosperity Universities, part of the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. This is about 90 universities that are committed to pursuing active engagement in economic development, and winning their top award was certainly wonderful validation of the work that we carry out every day at Iowa State. We've been eligible for those awards for 7 years. And in those 7 years, we've won awards 5 times and been a finalist 1 other time. So really great work that our team is doing every day. We work to spread ourselves across the state. I'll talk more about our operations that operate in all 99 counties, but just 2 weeks ago, Mayor John Hale of Ames, Iowa, declared that week officially EDIR Week in the city of Ames, and we spread out across the state, 6 different counties, presenting to local groups to talk to them about the work that we do in economic development, but also meeting with local businesses to better understand what we can do to help them more going forward. The John Papajohn Center at Iowa State University. This is an operation that has been recognized nationally and internationally for the outstanding work that we do in working with both student entrepreneurs and working with entrepreneurs in the central Iowa area. Most recently, this past year, USASB, which is the organization of educators in entrepreneurship higher education, awarded us their Model University Accelerator Award. And that award was given for our SciStarters program, which is a program we run for students over the summer, essentially paying them to intern in their own business. Regent Dunkel was with us a couple of years ago to help judge the final presentations those students made, and it's really energizing having a chance to hear them after they've done the great work over the summer. A reminder, 2 years ago, 2022, the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers named our center the top entrepreneurship center in the entire world. And this is a group of 240 entrepreneurship centers from around the world. To have that sort of recognition for a center in Ames, Iowa, is pretty cool. The key for us in getting this recognition is that all 7 of the colleges at Iowa State are actively engaged in these entrepreneurship efforts. The Startup Factory is our program, our accelerator designed to work with businesses really coming out of Iowa State, discoveries in the labs at Iowa State, and taking those to the next level to help them advance their programs, their companies. Cumulatively, the graduates of that program have raised $98 million. That's non-dilutive capital, so that's capital fundraising like the SBIRs and other grants. And we continue to have great success with the graduates each year coming out of that program. We're running 2 cohorts a year in that program. Iowa Small Business Development Centers. The state office is located at Iowa State, so the director and her team are part of our team at EDIR. We also have the Ames and Des Moines centers. There are 11 other centers across the state, 1 at University of Iowa, 1 at Northern Iowa, and the remainder at community colleges. I'm sorry, that's a total of 13 across the state. And they're working really with small businesses every day in all parts of our state to help them enhance and improve. A highlight last year was over $108 million in sales increases as a result of the work SBDC counselors did working with those businesses. So we all know it was a very tough year in parts of the state. Tornadoes hit Minden and Greenfield, the flooding in northwest Iowa, and SBDC and, in fact, the entire EDIR team really jumped in to help in these areas. All 5 of the units in EDIR provided employees. We very quickly got boots on the ground from the SBDC team. As soon as the areas were safe, we were in there talking to small businesses about how we could help them recover. SBDC collaborated with CIRRUS, which is our engineering extension operation, to do a survey of businesses in all those areas to find out who had what needs and help meet those needs. And also, for the first time, we had a collaboration with Iowa State University Surplus, where we provided surplus furniture and computers to businesses in those areas to help them recover more quickly, get back on their feet, get back in business. So CIRRUS, I just mentioned, that's our engineering extension operation, works with small to mid-sized manufacturers in all 99 counties across the state of Iowa. Over the last 5 years, companies they worked with, and they worked with companies in all 99 counties during that time, reported over $3 billion in economic impact as a result of the work that CIRRUS engineers and consultants did helping their businesses. The Iowa State University Research Park. We have a wonderful, vibrant research park that works with startups, which really was our founding principle, was working with startups that came out of Iowa State, but all the way up to working with major multinational corporations who have locations in our park. The key to our extraordinarily high occupancy rate, I'm not allowed to say nearly 100% because if you want space, we got space for you. But we're doing extremely well, and it's really because of the concierge service we provide to those companies, helping them connect with Iowa State students and Iowa State researchers. This is an operation, this research park, that really has an impact not just in central Iowa, though, it's all across the state. The companies that are there have operations across the state. We're involved in research activities coming out of the park that impact all 99 counties. And we've had substantial growth. Over the last 9 years, we've doubled the space at the park, we've doubled the number of tenants, and we've doubled the number of employees. Our two most recent buildings, in December of 2023, we opened the Pivot Bio building. Pivot Bio is a Silicon Valley startup that's focused on unique new ways to deliver nitrogen fertilizer directly to seeds to reduce the amount of fertilizer that needs to be spread indiscriminately across fields. We were thrilled when they decided to open their major Midwest operation in our research park. And then in December of 2024, we'll open the Alliant Energy Agricultural Innovation Lab. That's a place where our digital ag operation in our College of Agricultural and Life Sciences will be based. And that's a group that works very closely with major corporations, doing over $10 million a year in corporate-funded research each year. Together with these two additions to the research park, they alone are going to increase our space by another 14%, bringing us to over 1 million square feet at the research park. And we've got new projects coming up next. The Business Record this week featured the fact that we are developing some mixed-use properties at the research park now that will offer apartment space and also additional retail space as we continue to pursue the live, work, play approach in our research park. And then our Office of Innovation Commercialization, this is our tech transfer operation. They advance discoveries across all aspects of our campus, faculty in all aspects of our campus. This year we ranked number 42 among U.S. universities in the number of patents that were granted for discoveries at Iowa State. So it's an honor to have this chance to work in this vibrant area and continue to help communities all across our state, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions or comments for David? Regent Hensley?
Thank you. Great report, great report. One of the things that, as I think it really is for all of the universities, that I noticed as I was reading through all the material, you've got great reports this year, and I'm sure you've had great reports in the past. For those startup companies that you're identifying, it's really helpful. It would be helpful to me if we had some historical data about, okay, startup companies that you had 3 years ago, where are they at in year 2, where are they at in year 3, and what is the impact that they're having. Naming some of those companies, I think would be very helpful as well. I know I can't remember which university report it was, but there was one that actually had some names of some of the companies. I just think that that would really give us a much better feel. We have a lot of startup companies, but in all honesty, 3 or 5 years from now, are they still around? And my guess is, just knowing statistics, that they're not. But I'd like to see, some historical data in that regard.
Great.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, David, very much. Okay. Randy, if you would like to present.
Set, Keith? Okay. Thank you. As echo what John and David both said, thank you for this opportunity to present to the Regents every year. We really do appreciate the opportunity to update you on our programming and the outcomes that we have throughout the year. For the 25th consecutive year, you and I served clients in all 99 counties across the state. What I'm really always proud of is the engagement we have with our students, primarily undergrad students. But a third of the students here at UNI are working on a project related to business and community services through the classroom, through our clients, or through our programs. That's pretty outstanding. That doesn't just happen. We really focus on how do we keep our students engaged. And we do a good job of leveraging state funding. And this year we exceeded 4,000 clients for the first time ever. So that's a pretty outstanding number. Just a quick reminder, we have programs in entrepreneurship and small business work. We work with communities and economic development. We work with the foundry industry, market research, and then we also have programs in the environment, sustainability, and those primarily relate toward small businesses as well. I'm just going to give you a few highlights in a couple of programs. There are 5 programs here to kind of outline what happened this past year. We worked with the Defense Logistics Agency as a part of the Department of Defense for the last 30 months to enhance the supply chain for the defense industry. We were very successful in the Foundry 4.0 types of techniques of automation and sensors, but one good thing happened along the way here, and I'd like to take great credit for this, but it was a little bit lucky. We had the Department of Defense give us a chance to go after more funding. We were able to renovate the foundry as a part of our applied engineering building, which the timing of that had to be right too. So in the back of that building, which you'll see by springtime, will be the most modern foundry on a college campus in the United States. So we're very proud of that. What this will lead to is more employment, more students, and a very important industry for Iowa. I think more than 90% of every product you've got in your life starts with a casting. So UNI has had a long history of this, and we're very excited about how this came together. Yesterday, we had our 4th annual Family Business Conference in Des Moines. We aren't helping family businesses learn how to run their business. We're helping them through those thorny issues of family governance, trying to make Thanksgiving fun rather than difficult. And about 87% right now of businesses have some family tie, and more than 54% of the GDP in this country come from family-owned businesses. They share with each other, they learn from each other, and it's just amazing how much they trust this forum because there's no media there, there's no service providers there, nobody's trying to sell them anything, and they enjoy learning. And that the time they spend there, it's hard to get them out because they learn so much from each other and they share. So this has been a wonderful experience for our family-owned businesses in the state of Iowa. We really started all of our economic development 37 years ago with planning. And I think back to my early days here, and we were talking about millennium plans. What a stretch that would be to talk about the year 2000 and millennium plans. We're helping Clarinda right now at 2035. So it just shows visioning makes a difference, planning makes a difference in the communities and in the regions we work with. We also worked alongside of CIRRUS and the SBDC up in the flooding in northeast Iowa. They had their role. We worked more on what was happening to the residents and what kind of data can we gather for the city, for the economic developers so that they can have an impact. So that really worked well. Now, another exciting project, you always like to hear about collaboration. We're working with a project right now on wealth in rural Iowa. It's with Iowa State Extension, with University of Iowa, with Wellmark, and with UNI. We're working on all of the wealth strategies from financial to human to natural resources. We got 2 pilot projects. One's Manchester and one's Van Buren County. There aren't a lot of resources flowing to this, so we're doing it with the idea this will lead to something bigger and we can pay for it. But this is an experiment of doing community-wide strategic planning, look at all the 8 wealth generators. So we're pretty excited. We couldn't do it alone. We're learning a lot about each other and our resources, and it's kind of fun to do this level of project. Iowa Center for Employee Ownership. We've worked with the governor's office for the last 4 years to create and to manage the Iowa Center for Employee Ownership. It's not the UNI Center for Employee Ownership. This is the Iowa Center for Employee Ownership. So why do we even need this? Iowa's 46th in the country in the number of ESOPs, employee stock ownership programs that we have. So we're using ESOP companies to help spread the word. Regent Kramer has been very generous with his time and his expertise in helping with this process. We just had a Center for Employee Ownership conference. We had 23 ESOP companies there, and each of them pledged to go out into the region and help promote this. We received a Ford Foundation grant, which the whole purpose is, how do we increase rural ESOPs? And I use this example quite a bit. If a company of 50 in Cedar Falls or Des Moines goes away, we can probably absorb them. But Regent Ray, I'll start to use it, but I say if it was in Emmitsburg, a company of 50 that doesn't continue on and the assets are liquidated, that's your community leadership, that's your school leadership. Those are your donors to your nonprofit organizations. Employee ownership is critical to this state and to expand our ESOPs and other types of way for employee ownership. Just a real quick celebration note, our Tallgrass Prairie Center this year celebrated its 25th anniversary. Over the years, 50,000 acres of rural right-of-ways have been turned to native prairies that don't need any type of maintenance. We've also developed a nice little cottage industry of native seeds in the state for recreating these natural prairies. So it's a long-term, and it's time to really celebrate those 25 years and their collaborations with our other institutions too. And lastly, we also have a very strong entrepreneurship program. How do you know you're successful? I just want to point out the last part of this is we had our last 4 naming of the suites came from former student entrepreneurs. These are $30,000 suite sponsors for 5 years, and the last 4 are from students from 8 to 10 years ago that are now up doing their good work. And we talk to our students from the time they come on board about doing well to do good. And it's paying huge dividends for us right now. And they're also the ones advising all of our students and being the mentors. And they are staying in the state of Iowa at a high rate. It's much easier to track our students than it is to track some of the other companies that we work with. We have that. So thank you for this opportunity. We think we provide a very good investment for the state of Iowa. All 3 of us do. We leverage what we get from the state for resources, and we're very engaged across this state. So thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Regent Barker?
Just quickly, I've always liked your foundry, but when I first visited it, it didn't strike me as the most advanced on any campus in the country. But so to hear that that's the direction you're going very soon, and plus all the things we've seen here the last couple of days, is just great to see you and I on the move.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It still looks like a foundry.
Oh, I know, but to be the most advanced, you said, of
It
any
is.
foundry on
Best
a
equipped.
university campus. That's great.
Any other questions or comments? I always look forward to this every year. You all provide passion and excitement for what you do and what you do for the state. So thank you. The board has necessity to meet in closed session in accordance with the Iowa Code Section 21.5.1.c to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent and premature disclosure would likely prejudice or disadvantage the position of the board. At the conclusion of closed session, the board will convene an open session. Is there a motion that the board enter into closed session?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Regent Dunkel. Is there a second?
Second by Robert.
Second by Regent Kramer. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Regent Barker.
Yes.
Regent Ryswick.
Yes.
Regent Rouse.
Yes.
Regent Hensley. Yes. Regent Dunkel.
Yes.
Regent Kramer.
Yes.
Regent Lindemeyer.
Yes.
Regent Bates votes yes. Motion is carried.